conversation about managing people. For the first time, we're talking about you could say a live wire subject, which is changes in the country at large, and specifically changes in how the structure of profits and profitability has changed in the country. It's riveting to watch it, and at many levels we felt privileged to be able to be first-hand observers of this. And I think your industry, our industry, is both going through. I think both of our industries are the cutting edge of that shift in profitability, and it's both shift in the share of profits between large and small, right, and the shift in growth rates. Profit growth for we'll divide it between rulers being the existing leaders, challengers being the next rung down, and the polite word we could find is plebeians for everybody else, right? So rulers, challengers, and plebeians. There's been a dramatic change in balance of power. Pramod, should we start or Sunani? Please, go on.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So in the recent past, markets have shown exceptional highs. There are days where we have seen lows, highs.
Mic level. Okay, go on.
No, sir. You need to speak on mic first.
Oh, you need to speak on the mic. Okay, I see. Okay.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone. In the recent past, markets have shown exceptional highs, making new records every day. On some other days, they have witnessed sharp falls as well. The investors have been left wondering on how to and whether to time the market. Today, we are gathered to delve into the rising opportunities in the Indian equity market. We have exceptional panels here who will share their insights and experiences that will guide us through the key themes and trends shaping the Indian economy and help us identify and analyze the resulting investment opportunities. Thank you for joining us. Please start up. You can take it.
Thank you so much. Now, thank you folks for coming. I understand it's a rainy day and I understand it's the middle of a working day. So very grateful for all of you being here. The reason we thought we should congregate and we should share with you our thinking on what is the subject of defining importance to our firm, but I suspect it's of defining importance to your readers as well, which is what has happened in India in the last decade, specifically the last 5 years, which has dramatically changed the balance of corporate power in the country. And our analysis suggests that the changes are actually very different from what the conventional narrative. The conventional narrative in India is that the big are winning and the small are losing, right? That's the conventional narrative. The data suggests something different, and we'll get into why these changes have happened. And then in the last 10 minutes, we'll get into the consequences of this, right? The consequences are also surprising. For example, one of the consequences of this is a completely new elite is emerging, an elite which is non-IIT, non-IIM, non-overseas educated, local graduates, local BCom, BSc, chartered accountants, right? So another consequence is the rise of Indian women, right? Women now have more money in the bank than men. They have more bank accounts than men as well. As I'm sure those of you who cover personal finance would be interested to know this, because I suspect your biggest audience now will be affluent women, right? And it's only appropriate, therefore, that we have our young woman in our firm represented through Nandita. She's done much of the work behind this. She's done much of the work which has gone into this change of view. This has profoundly influenced how we invest. The point of view that we're going to communicate to you has profoundly influenced how we invest, and thankfully it's also led to a change in our investment performance, a subject which I've discussed with several of you over the last couple of years. It's also led to a turnaround in our investment performance. So I'll begin by laying the ground with some basic data, right? If you look at the world's big stock markets, right, the stock markets which account for 80% of global market cap, by far and away, by a long distance, the two best performing markets are the world's two largest free market democracies. This is not an accident. There is very good reasons now, if you understand this dynamic, there's very good reasons why India and America are by a long distance the world's best performing stock markets, right? So if you look at the last 10 years, America is number one, but effectively we are number two. Taiwan and India is tied at 11.8, but Taiwan, as many of you know, is effectively one company. So this is USD. All returns are USD, and these are TSRs, market TSRs. We took this from Bloomberg, right? So India and America tied, but look at the 20-year numbers, right? We are over a 20-year period, we are by some distance the best performing market. And interestingly, over a 20-year period, we are the only large market to give double-digit dollar returns, right? A slightly more abstract subject, we're not going to get into that today, but for a separate discussion, perhaps our next meeting. Amongst the world's large markets, the two least correlated markets are the two best performing markets. That's an astonishing finding, we believe. ये finance में usually होता नहीं है. Very rare in finance that the two best performing stock markets are also the ones with the lowest correlation with each other. Obviously, that creates enormous scope for low risk wealth compounding, because if India and America have very low correlation, and they do, India and America are unusually low correlated, even though they are the best performing markets over the last 20 years, right? Over the last 10 years, we are basically number 2. Taiwan is TSMC, and TSMC, for obvious reasons, in this AI era has come through. But both India and Taiwan are tied at 11.8. Depending on your views on the AI boom, Taiwan will either move ahead of us or they'll fall behind us. But focusing on the relevant issue, against all odds, and despite any commentary that somehow we are a laggard market, somehow we are an uneven compounder, at an overall level, this country is compounded really smooth manner over 20 years. Look at the stability in return. These are dollar returns, 12% dollar, roughly 15% rupee returns, right? Now, what's interesting to understand is the dynamic behind it. So the rest of the presentation, we will peel the onion layer by layer by layer and go to the core of what makes India such a powerful compounding engine. And as I said to some of you informally, the reasons are quite surprising. Why our country has become such a powerful compounding engine? The reasons are not the conventionally discussed reasons. This hasn't got that much to do with infrastructure, for example. It's got a lot to do with new technology. But just to sort of quantify the gap between us and everybody else. So this is, if you had invested $10,000, back in 2012, right? And you'd invested in China, you'd invested in India, and you'd also said, boss, let me do MSCI as well, MSCI EM. You're done across EM, right? You'd be twice as richer, India versus China, right? India has delivered 2x the returns compared to China and versus MSCI, right? China is a much discussed basket case story. But what other people don't realize is it's not just China. More generally, EM has been a dud story for the last 10 years. The only EM, it's stunning, the only EM, right? Look at EM, $10,000 back in 2012 is 12,118. The EM, rest of EM has barely compounded, India has doubled money. Now, why is that, right? At a superficial level, here's the reasoning. So what we did, and Nandita led this crunch 2 years ago, was we did a very simple crunch. We said, let's look across the world, look for companies that have grown revenues at 10% in dollar terms over 10 years and with a minimum 10% ROE. 10% rev growth, 10% ROE, 10 साल लगातार, 10, 10, 10, ठीक है? And let's label them consistent compounders. Right? When you look across the world over the last 20 years, you find that China has 126 such companies, India has 162 such companies. Remember, the Chinese economy is 5 times our size. They are 5 times our size, and yet the number of consistent compounders China possesses are fewer than ours. But even more stunningly, when we measured the returns, stock market returns generated in dollar terms by the consistent compounders, China was 10%, the Indian consistent compounders were 26%, right? This is the engine room of Indian compounding. This is the engine room of Indian compounding, right? The question that then arose is, why are we so good at this? Right? Remember, the rest of the emerging world is a holiday destination, right? Baki kuch hai nahi. I mean, there's nothing there. You can see these are great places to visit on holiday, but paisa ban nahi sakta yahan pe. You can't make money if in 20 years only 10 companies have compounded at 10% rev growth and 10% ROE. कुछ देश में तो वो भी नहीं है, right? वहाँ पे फुटबॉल बढ़िया है and गाना वाना अच्छा चलता है, but पैसा बन नहीं सकता, right? And these are big markets. I'm just doing this level of humor, but these are giant markets. So when I go abroad, so we have some endowments and pension funds in the Western world who invest with us. They are stunned to see this. क्योंकि उनके दिमाग में these are all candidates for allocation. And we tell them, how can you allocate to these markets with a straight face You help us understand, right? Now, let's go deeper, right? Why is India so good at this? So, big part of the reason is this line coming down, right? So, this orange line, so once a year Nandita does this massive crunch. We take the top 12,000 companies in the country and we look at how much of the country's profits come from the 20 largest listed entities. Okay? So this line, this orange line, as you can see, so just to go even further back, in 1992, the top 20 ka profit share was 15%. Okay? Top 20 ka profit share just after liberalization was 15%. So top 20 us zamane would be Hindustan Motors, Premier Automobiles, Century Textiles, right? Those sorts of firms would be top 20 in 1992, 15%. By the time we got to say Lehman Brothers or just thereafter, the top 20 ka profit share had crawled up to 30%. Right? 92 with 15%, 2010 tak 30% hua. And then we went through a decade of zoom, right? The top 20 profit share just rocketed over 10 years. It reached its zenith, its peak at the height of COVID.
So that's market cap.
This is profit share, PAT share. Top 20 companies ka PAT share. Top 20 companies profits as a percentage of baki companies ka profit, right? So denominator here is 12,000 companies. Numerator is the 20 largest listed companies. 20 largest listed by PAT, right? So good clarification. 20 largest by PAT. Okay. So Lehman ke height mein, for obvious reasons, the 20 largest companies made all the money, right? Sorry, not Lehman. COVID ke height mein, the 20 largest companies made all the money, and then came this precipitous drop, right? So the latest crunch we made, top 20 now make 45% of the profits, and if I look back, right, this is the drop that we did not anticipate, right? We as in Marcellus, we did not anticipate this drop, and that was a key dropping the ball, especially on my part. And you know, at one level, I can tell you that there's no way I could have anticipated this, but at another level, you can rightfully say you should have anticipated it because that's what we get paid for. Anyway, जब हो गया है जिंदगी में आगे बढ़ना है कमाना है उससे, right? No point sort of, we're not paid to sit and whinge and moan about the past. Our job is to learn. We are supposed to be learning machines, right? So we became very curious कि ये क्यों हो रहा है? Why is the share of giant companies in profit share reducing? And remember, this is happening at a time, it's not as if HDFC Bank or Asian Paints profit compounding has stopped. Contrary to some people's belief, HDFC Bank and Asian Paints are still compounding profits at around 20%, right? So the giants are compounding profits at a rapid rate. HDFC Bank, Bajaj Finance, Asian Paints, Titan, profit compounding is actually rock solid, but the share of profits has reduced. That means there are hundreds of other companies growing faster. So I turned to Nandita a year ago saying, पता करो नंदिता क्या हो रहा है, कहां से कौन इतना कमा रहा है बॉस, कौन इतना कमा रहा है, right? She'll explain that to you and then we'll get into कैसे कमा रहे हैं. Two different questions. Given that the giants are doing pretty well on profit compounding, HDFC Bank, Titan, who are the chotus who are compounding profits even faster over now 4 years? Who are they? We'll first focus on the identification and then we'll get into the why is this happening, and then finally who are the winners in this, right? So because our job is to focus on the winners and make money from that. So over to you, Nandita.
So this is essentially post-COVID, the fall down.
So the height of the top 20 profit boom is the peak of COVID. So assume the year to March 21, right? Year to March 21, assume that's the peak of COVID, and then the fall down is year to March 22, 23, 24, and my reckoning will continue to year to March 25, right? So top 20 ka profit share peaks basically around the time the second wave hits, and then it drops off precipitously, right? And if I reflect and retrospect, initially pehla 2 saal we said this is something around revenge shopping, COVID ka adjustment. It's only last year when I turned around to my colleagues and said COVID is long gone, but these structural trends are now established, right? And yesterday, those of you who attended our Acme Trade Body event, that is but one manifestation of this tectonic shift in profitability, right? There are many different layers. आपका industry change हो रहा है, हमारा industry change हो रहा है, हमारे industry का change हो रहा है, our industry change is resulting in things like APME, things like lots of small PMSs. When I set up Marcellus in 2018, we had I think 250 or 270 PMSs. In the last 5 years, something like 150 have come on board, right? And as I'm sure you will probably know as much as I will know, this is not going to stop. Superstar fund managers are not going to sit in large houses, large fund houses. They're going to say, I want my own, whether PMS or AIF or the fund construct is a subject of detail. But that as soon as you get a burgeoning of chota fund houses, that creates a different regulatory ask of SEBI. That creates a separate landscape for you guys to write about. It creates different challenges and opportunities for customers. And that's the shift, right? I'm using our industry as a metaphor. I'm using our industry as an example. But the same change is happening in every other industry. And the job of an investor, investor in the sense private equity, stock market wale, becomes to capitalize on this tectonic shift. Right? So the burgeoning of the PMS industry, the burgeoning of the alternatives industry is also a byproduct of the same forces that we're going to discuss. So since we are sitting in Mumbai, if you want to use a mental model, you can use ours or your industry. Both of us, I think, are in the same disruption. Right? Both of us are in the same disruption. I mean, several of you introduced yourself. If we had done a similar event 15 years ago, everybody would be from a conventional media house, right? And several of you introduced yourself, several of you are from non-conventional media houses, right? The same, so we call it alternatives in our profession, there are alternatives in your profession. And those alternatives are buoyant, they're effective, they have a voice, and you could argue, much like in our industry, alts ki taraf hi hawa chal rahi hai, right? But the interesting thing is, same is happening in luggage industry. The same is happening in specialty chemicals industry. The same is happening in food coloring industry, right? So हमको लगता है that we are special and our industry is getting disrupted. The reality is the whole country is getting disrupted. So the forthcoming book that Nandita and I are publishing, it's called Behold a Leviathan, the unusual rise of modern India, right? Because the disruption is across the country. It's social disruption, economic disruption. It's really exciting as an investor to invest in this, but it's also much harder. The Purana construct was much easier. Those of you who have read Unusual Billionaires, उसमें आपको बताया था Purana construct was super easy. You basically identify people who've done well over 10 years, 20 years, you place your money and then you sit back and watch your money compound, right? So we'll get into some tax data now, corporate tax data. This is fresh, latest, greatest data.
Right. So when Saurabh came to me last year and I said, okay, let's have a look at this now. So what I found interestingly was that the income tax department publishes this data every year. So I mean, they have published most of it in 2018 because they just made everything from physical to digital in that year. But latest data, which was updated just a few weeks ago, was for FY22. So that's the latest data point that I have. So I just took all such data from the income tax data website and I collated it and I put this plot. So what I did was they gave it by income category. So there's a stratification that they give of how many returns have been filed as well as the total of the gross total income or the PAT of the companies. So I just did a plot. I segregated the categories into high PAT, medium PAT and low PAT. So the threshold was very simple based on a heuristic. Let's say every company that has a PAT greater than 1 crore will be classified as a high PAT company. Anything between 10 lakhs to 1 crore will be a medium PAT, and anything below 10 lakhs of profits will be a low PAT company. So just summing all of this up and just plotting it across, if you can see the chart on that screen, the blue line, the dark blue line that you can see is just rocketing through, and that's the PAT more than 1 CR. So now if you can see the other two lines, which is between 10 lakh and 1 crore and low PAT, which is less than 10 lakhs, they have basically gone nowhere starting from FY12 to FY22. So last 10 years, they've basically gone nowhere. There's only one set of these companies which have just rocketed through and they've just made their mark. So it turns out that around 17% of India's profitable companies sit in this bracket, and they account for almost 55% of profits, which are they account for almost 90% actually, close to 90% of profits, non-zero profits basically. So what has happened? These are around 6,000 companies in the country whose profits have been growing at least 15% per annum. And when you compare that,
Listed and unlisted.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
this is basically all companies for which
Profitable.
government is reporting data. Sare companies, right?
but profitable because this is income
Yeah,
tax
and,
data.
and this is actually a good caveat. So 1 million companies in India are filing nil returns. Okay? So that number, that count of a million companies filing nil return, a decade ago that was 600,000. So nil returns ka bhi growth aaya hai. And we think the plight of these folks down here, right? The low pat and medium pat, right? Effectively in real terms, after adjusting for inflation, these fellows are also not seeing any growth in their profitability over a 10-year cycle, right? We think the nil return guys are even more pounded because that's why 600,000 decade ago has become 1 million nil returns. And notice how the high profit line, remember, represents 90% of India's PAT, right? So 90% of India's PAT, 17% of companies, but 90% of PAT. Notice how this line is getting steeper by the passing year, right? This is the disruption in one chart, right? हाँ जी बोलिए.
Sir, so basically, this is like the highest paid companies which have grown the most.
हाँ सभी हाँ
Money makes money.
हाँ नहीं वैसा नहीं है. Had that been the case, you would have seen those trends before. We'll give you another. We'll keep peeling the onion, right? This steepening and look how post-COVID the line almost goes vertical. Right, the line goes vertical post-COVID. Now think about it. Right? GST was 2017, UPI 2016, 17, 18. Right, National Highway doubling 2013 to 2023. Right, what exactly has happened in the last 4 years for this high PAT to rocket? Right, this CAGR now, this is 25% CAGR. End to end is around 15%. 12 se 22 is 15%. But the recent 4 years is 25%, and even more interestingly, F23 का data छापा नहीं है सरकार ने. When F23 comes, my hunch is it will be here, right? F20 and F24 तो चलो time लगेगा. F23 छापा नहीं है. This came, F22 came after the election 2 weeks ago. F23 I reckon will be here, right? So this is the disruption in one slide, right? And as I said, it's your industry, our industry, every industry, and it's creating, both new opportunities and new challenges, right? One of the reasons consumption is weak is if a million companies, remember India has 1.4 million companies. उसमें से 1 million companies are filing a nil return. For roughly 400,000 order are 400,000 order here, no growth in profits in real terms, right? You therefore have a corporate elite, companies earning 1 crore or more, right? 17% of companies are here. They are obviously having it good, so they are buying the expensive stuff, and hence the K-shaped recovery ka upar wala danda, right? But K-shaped ka niche wala danda you can see here. In fact, if you were to say this is the K visualized for you. This is the K visualized for you, and this is the corporate sector. If you want to extrapolate from here to workers, think of the workers here, think of the people employed here, right? And you can then see why, if only 17% of companies are flourishing and 83% are having a hard time, naturally that has impacts on the workers behind it, right? But even more fascinating data. Nandita, carry on.
Yeah. So what we did was, for precisely the points discussed previously, we said that let's have a look, where is this growth coming from? Even after 1 crore and onwards, that's a very big set of companies where we can see that growth. So where exactly is that coming from? So one way to go about it was look at the CMI data. Now that's the best data that we have so far on corporate PAT, because the problem with most of the data is that either you have just listed company data or a very limited set of
So just to
private
quickly
company
explain,
data.
see, the government data is brilliant, but the government data is not letting you trace one company over time, right? The government is giving you tax buckets, right? तो उसके अंदर if a company is doing well, he's shifting across tax buckets over time, right? So we needed to get a data set which had the same company 10 साल, and we need it beyond listed, because if we can just come and say listed, then to it's not the economy, right? So Nandita found this CMI data set, 30,000 company and profits going back 10 years. There is an obvious survivorship bias. The companies who are dead are obviously not in the data, but uska hum kuch kar nahi sakte, right? And none of us have a resource to get dead companies ka profits. So we use the CMI data set to say who's actually benefiting from this remarkable environment.
Yeah. So what we did was, it was around 30,000 companies and we deciled it. So we cut it into 10 equal parts basis the PAT numbers that we have, absolute PAT levels. And as a result, we have deciles now. So 10 deciles. Beyond decile 4, you could not even calculate their CAGRs because it was all negative numbers. So obviously, for obvious reasons, I'm not adding that. But from decile 1 to 4, what was interesting is that decile 2 is where you can see most of the growth. So the dark blue line again over here, which is decile 2, or the next 3,000 companies, they are the ones who are actually doing well. The first 3,000 companies, which includes most of the listed universe, they have not grown as quickly. And the rest obviously are not doing well at all.
So you can see again post-COVID, everybody perks up a little bit, right? So these are 3-year rolls. So FY 20 to 23 is you're starting in 20 and you're doing a CAGR till 23, right? Similarly 19 to 20. But notice how the lines not only slope up, decile 2 ka line slopes up the most post-COVID. Okay? So decile 2 was doing well pre-COVID, but they've really had a shot in the arm post-COVID. So when you said money begets money, then to D1 should have done the best. No, but D1 is not doing the best in India. Okay? So we went back into the income tax data and the same picture emerges from the income tax data. So we'll now pull it together in a summary. Both income tax data and CMI दिखा रहे हैं that we have basically a ruler class in India. Rulers are the 800 largest companies. They account for 70% of the country's profits, 60% of the country's profits, 800 largest companies, 60% of the country's profits, 12 to 22 CAGR of 15%. Now, these are the big companies. Their profits are above $60 million. So 500 crore ke upar ka, a typical ruler is 500 crore ya usse zyada ka profits, right? 800 company here, right? This is the top strata of the income tax data, right? They haven't granularized it uske aage, right? Maybe when we become richer, they will give further granularity. This is the highest strata of the income tax, corporate tax data. Then uske niche are the most interesting people, the challengers, right? And challengers are companies with profits between 5 to 50 crore. 5 to 50 crore $5 to $50 million, I'm sorry. So that means in rupee terms, maniye 40 to 400 crore. Challengers are companies, and we are literally, Marcellus literally is a challenger, right? Challengers are companies, 40 to 400 crore ke beech mein profits. Their profits are growing at 16% compared to 15% for the top guys. The challengers are decile 2. So if money begat money, which is, I agree, is the common notion in our country. Common notion in India mein kya hai? The big are getting bigger, everybody else is churma. But that's not what the data is saying. Neither corporate tax data nor CMI data. Both data sets are showing that a new challenger class is emerging around 5,000 companies who are growing profits at 16% 10-year CAGR. Last 5-year CAGR is close to 30%. Right? Rapid growth and छोटे company. Right? So it's no surprise that we are doing this in serviced office. Right? These cubby holes that you see, we also started off in a place like this in the suburbs. Right? The cubby holes in the suburbs are producing the challengers. Right? The cubby holes in the suburbs of Bangalore and Gurgaon and Bombay are producing the challengers. But again, ours is the slightly more glamorous aspect to challenges. There are humdrum challenges in manufacturing sector. Go on, Neil.
So how do you account for subsidiaries in this?
So if a Bajaj Finance does a challenger, it will show up as a challenger. Asian Paints or a Trent does a challenger, it will show up as a challenger. So it is entirely possible that these 800 companies, the big guys, have created perhaps 800 challengers. But the numbers of challengers are large enough for us to believe it's a phenomenon beyond the big guys. But it's an interesting point. If I look at our portfolio, right, and remember we came at it two different ways. Nandita did the macro work, our analyst did the stock specific work. And then I looked at the portfolio and realized increasingly the portfolio is becoming big companies who are breeding internal challengers. a Trent creating a Zudio, a Tube creating a TI Clean Mobility, a Bajaj Finance creating a Bajaj ka housing finance ka business या Bajaj का payments app का business, and Asian Paints creating a home decor ka business. So one of the most interesting facets of this is CEOs and promoters who clocked this 4, 5, 6 years ago. Firstly, hats off to them. They clocked this before geeks like us saw the data. But CEOs and promoters who not only saw this, funded subsidiaries with independent management teams, different business models, highly disruptive business models, right? We are now benefiting from investing in them. That's one of the reasons for the turnaround in performance, right? But that becomes, I think, the new norm in India. The new superstar company in India will not be the behemoth, the ruler company. The new superstar will be either a challenger, a disruptive company coming through the ranks, starting in the suburbs of Bombay and building their way up to Lower Parel, if you want to put it in jargon of our industry, or the new superstar company will be a large company which creates challenger franchises, right? And Tube Investments would be a obvious example, right? Velan and team acquired CG Power down the road here, but they also created a two-wheeler, EV two-wheeler, EV tractor, EV truck, so on and so forth, right? And similarly, if you look at Zudio's ascendancy over the last 4 years, right? Go on.
One question before we see, I'm a little confused because these numbers,
Yeah.
when you say rulers, challengers, and the third category, it appears like we are looking at companies, the number of companies as in total, and then you're looking at top 800 companies and the next and the next. But the way you are narrating it sounds like it's sectoral in nature, in the sense that in each sector, the bigger ones and the middle ones and the...
good point actually, Malakshmi. So if I'm making it sound sectoral...
Because, I mean, if you look at the 800 companies, I mean, predominantly there will be banks and, you know, the bigger businesses will have greater representation. The smaller businesses like tiles, etc., I mean, you know, it might be...
So it could well be that actually, you're right. If you're a power and infrastructure company, more likely than not, you'll be in the 800, right? On the other hand, if you're a disruptive garment manufacturer, you'll be more likely here. So there is a...
And the challengers in large industries will also qualify in the ruler category than the rulers in the...
If high profile people from the media could make a request to the government to give the sectoral cut on this, that'll be awesome, right?
No, but you should give us a takeaway from this.
So we're going to give you some sectoral takeaways. But on a serious note, one of the most useful layers of value add we're trying to squeeze out of this is to go back to this data and figure out in decile 2 which sectors are overrepresented. In decile 2 which sectors are overrepresented, or in the challenger box which sectors are overrepresented. At this juncture, the main point of view we're giving you guys is, if you make more than $60 million of PAT in India, you're in a good place, you're compounding profits at a really healthy rate, but you're in an even better place if your profits are between, say, 5 or 6 to $60 million, right? And you're really, unfortunately, jacked if you're below $5-6 million. Life is pretty rough if you're not in that $5-6 million, right? And through that, you can both see the churn in the economy and the K-shaped ka lower wala danda and the upper wala danda. But there's also a sectoral dimension. We haven't been able to get down to that granularity yet. Now the question then becomes, how, just to put this in sequential, chronological order, right? First effect was the wipe out of this class, right? Pehla wo demonetization, GST, the crackdown on tax evasion, rera shera, right? This dabba became empty, right? Now, even if we went back 10 years, is dabbe pe data to hoga nahi, right? You won't have unorganized small companies paying income tax. So it's kind of hard to fill that dabba, but my reading is, a decade ago, had we met in this building, this dabba would have accounted for a good 20-30% of India's profits, right? So initial few years, as the government went on a tax collection drive and GST kicked in, this dabba got khalied out, and these guys, the plebeians, were all right. Then we went through UPI, the shift to mobile commerce, and the COVID ka jhatka, right? And this piece actually is very visible. We don't have the time to give you the full kind of visual aspect of the corporate tax data. If you look at the corporate tax data, it's like watching a movie. You can see it emerging as we get into COVID. Pura Sunandita did a color coded thing for me. Pura लाल हो जाता है ये, blood all over the place here, right? So Demon GST, these guys got killed, but these guys were doing good. Then COVID, and effectively profit shift from here to here, right? You get a colossal concentration of profits from yahan se to yahan se. So if you put it in our context, our birth, and when we were born in 2018 1st December, I had no idea this was happening. I sort of kind of vaguely knew, but I had no idea what lay ahead. But even I could figure out by 2021 that the profits we were generating were not industry growth. We were taking somebody else's profits away, perhaps the profits of those missing PMSs that SEBI was talking about yesterday. Perhaps they gave us their profits and went AWOL, right? So COVID is this jhatka. Plebeians get killed. The plebeians now account for 98% by count of companies, but only 2% or 1% of the India's PAT. So 98% of companies by count sit there, but only 1% of India's PAT sits there. Sorry, I'm getting this wrong. Yeah, 98% of count, but only 15% of PAT. Right, 98% by count, 15% of the PAT share. The challenges then boomed, and the next piece, the piece that hasn't yet played out fully, right? This is the kind of movie ka agla bhag, jo aaya nahi hai, is these guys and going and kicking butt here. That's not yet happened. We haven't yet seen it happen properly. The challenge is going and kicking butt of the rulers, which I think is the next stage of Indian capitalism, right? So the first stage was you wipe out the tax evaders. Companies whose main competitive advantage was tax evasion, they get killed. Second stage was the Chotu, who doesn't have technology, doesn't have talent, doesn't have ability to sell on mobile commerce. That Chotu gets pulverized, and 5,000 challengers are born. This is the kind of VC, PE funding heartland, right? And the next stage will be these guys challenging the stock market and large companies saying, apna profit, humko de do. As I think many of you are intuiting, the challenges business models seem to be leaner, more tech savvy, more modern age. The rulers' business models could be more traditional, more bricks and mortar, and less suited to the modern age, right? Now, ye kyun hua, right? Nandita, if you could just elaborate on the kyun aspect.
Yeah. So throughout our work, we obviously have to travel a lot, and whenever we go and talk to people, we make it a point to ask them that how's their business doing and everything. So prima facie, they'll say that everything is fine and all. And when we ask them another question saying, what do you want your kids to come and join this business? Most often they say that no, we don't want them, we want them to go out. So that's a very key marker of what is happening here. And a lot of them during the same conversation say that, people have been using UPI, 80% of them pay using UPI, no one really uses hard cash anymore, check to obviously koi use karta nahi hai. All of these things is what we kept hearing, and then we said hang on, let's have a look at the data and see if this is corroborated in the data or not. So what we found was that the key drivers of this change firstly is UPI. So very interestingly, I think 2 years ago there's a chai wala right outside our office, our erstwhile office actually, and I went and spoke with him. He said that he started just after COVID had gotten over, so the offices were just beginning to function, and he used to sell hardly 300 cups a day. Cut through, I think 2022 end, which is when I asked him, he was selling 9 lakh cups a day. This is what he gave me. Obviously, there might be a few rounding errors here and there, but he's like, time hi nahi milta hai, I have to constantly keep making tea. Basically, that was his point. Then I asked him that how do you get funding for this? How do you manage your doodh, chai, patti and sugar and everything? He said that everything is the Malik who pays for all of this. He does it via UPI. Mujhe payment bhi UPI mein aata hai. Mera account hai Kotak mein. And I was stunned. I was like, okay, there's a story here. I need to go and check this out. So then we went and talked to a lot of these small business owners who we obviously talked to about them when we travel to multiple cities. And they said that most of our working capital financing has become much easier, because earlier it used to take a lot of time. If you were giving a check to someone, it used to take at least 3 days to get cleared. So paisa atka hua hota tha bank mein. Now because of UPI, because you can pay much quicker, it's like instantaneous bank transfer that happens.
So there's a chai ka chain, right? It's a chai street side chai is also becoming a chain business. Kya naam hai? Yole, right? Yole. I can't pronounce it because I'm not a Marathi, so we challenge. I'm sorry to the people I can't pronounce it. But Yole is becoming a chain. Vada pav is also becoming a chain, right? Jumbo King Vada pav, right? So I spoke to same part of research, and he explained why he's going to wipe out the sadak ka vada pav, right? So you're asking sectors. So if something as prosaic as chai and vada pav is getting formalized, which means after paying tax, the business model of someone who's getting paid on UPI is more cost efficient than the tax evading model, right? Imagine tax evading chai ka model is now a less efficient model than full tax paying Marcellus ke office ke bahar ka chai ka model. Why? Because the inefficiencies of UPI, no visit to the bank, get paid turant. The doodh wala also gets paid turant. The doodh wala doesn't have to wait for the subsequent day. He's getting paid that day for the cash. The vendor is getting paid. So working capital cycles are reducing. But if you're a chai wala who says, I'm not going to do this, boss, mere ko to apna purana chai patti ka dhanda chalana hai, then you get wiped out in modern India. Now, the further accelerator of this is this aspect. So look at any listed bank balance sheet, you will see that the SME book has doubled in the last 4 years, right? More than doubled actually. And you ask, in fact, HDFC, Kotak, they write in the annual reports that the fastest growing part of the balance sheet is unsecured SME finance. And if you ask them, aise kaise kar rahe ho? They said, we can see every cup of chai being sold. So we are therefore financing the chai wala at 10%. Remember, till this came along, that chai wala was getting financed at 22% by the money lender. So the money lender now gets shafted as the listed lender, whether it's a Bajaj Finance or HDFC or whoever, does this using UPI. In fact, I would submit to you that in this context, even credit bureau data is gradually useless, right? If our data can be tracked tick by a lender, तो credit bureau का efficacy घट जाता है. It's still relevant for retail, but especially for cash flow financing, right? This promises to be. Now इस पे AI अभी लगा नहीं है. If the banks now put AI on it, फिर तो और एक layer of polarization आएगा between the haves and have-nots, right? So it's very interesting. The more national you make the canvas, the lower you make the transaction costs. The more national you make the canvas, the lower you make the transaction cost, the lower you make the frictional costs, the more the superstars or the challengers pull away from the rest, right? So if you want to do a mental model of this, think of a Purana, say India 100 years ago. Think of a village economy. Every village is cut off from the rest of the nation. Every village will have a greengrocer, a butcher, a blacksmith, a mochi, etc. Right? Because every village is a self-contained island, cut off from the rest of the country. Now bring that village from 100 years ago to today. Right? UPI hai, smooth highways, the largest town 5 kilometers away. All the chota businesses in that town will either get wiped out, big city businesses will open branches there, or the few businesses that survive in the village will be those that expand and build broader franchises. Say koi achar ka business, which has a special type of achar based on this. This in microcosm is happening. Chai ke business mein, vada pav ke business mein, PMS mein, media mein, and indeed in the listed world, right? So one last dimension.
The last dimension is obviously rise of internet connectivity, courtesy Geo in 2017, where everyone, almost half the country, got access to very low rates of internet, and that sort of brought this proliferation of social media. Now, what that social media did was that it gave a chance to smaller companies, to smaller, just cottage industry owners who are actually hungry for more but could not reach out to a larger population. It gave them an access, a platform to reach out to the country, and the proliferation of that is we are seeing smaller these cottage industries coming up and thriving.
So let's now discuss implications. So yesterday at the PMS industry trade body event, we highlighted that the trade body for the PMS industry does something called compliance sutra, which is a simple thing. Every 15 days, a compliance expert comes on a Zoom call and all the PMSs log in and ask their kind of agony aunt type questions, right? Money laundering pe kya karu, account opening pe kya karu, etc. And the said expert sits in office in BKC and answers the questions. And that Zoom call is recorded, and thus a repository builds up of compliance knowledge. Now in the old India, that same service would have been provided one-to-one by a regulatory expert who would have earned his living selling his expertise to PMSs on a piecemeal basis, right? So a Purana model, inefficient, now obviously inefficient model gets disrupted by a new low-cost model, right? And now think of the same now in education. Say IIT JEE training. आपका पुराना मॉडल था, आप bricks and mortar लगाओगे, कोई star Ramesh sir will be teaching you to sit for IIT JEE. Now in this Zoom era, you have an office. Ramesh sir will be sitting in suburb of Delhi and doing a pan India class, right? And the Purana, it could be a listed business, by the way. The training business, the further education tutorial business could be a listed business, right? Access to funding hai. But the change in technology now wipes out the Ramesh sir wala face-to-face tutorial business, and one dude sitting with a laptop in Ghaziabad could now be the king of IIT JEE training for all you know, right? So it's not just, again, going back to money is not begetting money, brains are begetting. If you want to put it like that, brains or enterprise is now begetting money in modern India, which is why the rulers are headed for a colossal challenge, right? If it was just money begetting money, thoda tragic hota at many levels, right? Would be, I don't think that any country can progress like that. But the good news is the data is suggesting, forget Saurabh Mukherjee, right? Data is suggesting that brains are begetting money, the decile too, right? At the same time, we can't pretend that we're in some egalitarian utopia, because the plebeian companies are getting wiped out. Either you have brains, in which case, if you have brains and enterprise in modern India, the country is yours. Now that leads us to the change playing out, right? One of the reasons I migrated to this country was I read this book, right? So he's a great man. If you know him, it's your good fortune. We've only spoken to him a couple of times, but just a remarkable book, yaar. I mean, even today, it feels like he wrote it yesterday morning. In fact, he wrote it 17 years ago, which makes it even more remarkable that he wrote it 17 years ago, right? But practical चीजों पे आते हैं. We've been discussing challengers. ठीक है, challengers का background पे बाद में आते हैं. Simple way to understand the change in the country. You take the Nifty का boardrooms. Nifty 50, apex of corporate life. The apex of corporate life in India. Right? So Nandita took the Nifty as it stood in 2003, 2013 and 2023. 10 साल के difference में Nifty का boardroom. And we listed all the board directors, execs, non-execs. And we looked up their educational background, right? And the trend is fascinating, right? The non-IIT, non-IIM, non-foreign educated boardroom director now rules the Nifty boardroom, right? If any of you want to do a bet with me on whether this 54 will go to 64, I'm happy to take you on. I guarantee you this 54 will go to 64 in the next 4 or 5 years, right? This is the apex of corporate life, right? And just to take a bank we're all familiar with, feel free to go and check up HDFC Bank. So she did a year abroad. Had he not done that 1 year abroad, HDFC would be perfect, right? None of the board directors are IIT, IIM or overseas. They're all graduates of a famous university, the University of Mumbai, right? University of Mumbai, famous university, country ka largest bank by market cap, right? But more obviously, if you go down the market cap curve, by the way, these are all investee companies of ours. I'm invested, my parents are invested, our 8,000 clients are invested in these. If you go down the market cap curve, some of the best companies listed, we do listed, but unlisted is the same paradigm, are coming from regular colleges. So for example, if you were to go to Ahmedabad and meet either the folks behind MAS or Astral, Sandeep Engineer ji at Astral is a science graduate from a university in Gujarat. The MAS promoters, Gandhi family, they are chartered accountants from Ahmedabad, right? Pedigree in the conventional sense of the word. Pedigree in the conventional sense of the word, you speak the Queen's English, BBC English बोलोगे आप, gin and tonic पियोगे Bombay Gymkhana में बैठ के. All of that doesn't matter anymore. And we can, obviously, there's nothing wrong with drinking gin and tonic, don't get me wrong, right? I'll have a glass every so often. But it's not going to help my compounding if I sit in a posh club in Bombay and have a gin and tonic, right? It's neither going to get us any business. Our sales team is not going to be able to get business, or I won't be able to get business if I sit with a gin and tonic and speak good English, right? And that demise is also the challenger class ka rise, right? The fact that small and mid caps are doing well, especially the well-run small and mid-cap companies are doing well, is also reflective of the changes in the country, right? So the first implication is the completely new elite in the making. We're doing more research on who are this elite. This has obviously great ramifications for our client base, because if we go to the old world, the old establishment, it's going to be harder for us. Whereas if we can identify new pockets of wealth, right, especially those 5,000 challenger companies. Right, those 5,000 challenger companies owners are making money hand over fist. If we could go to them and say, sir, we are also challenger, you are also challenger, let's do a jugalbandi. That's an easier pitch than going to old elite established money, right? The next is the woman wala piece. This to I mean, Nandita के लिए obvious था. मेरे लिए ये इतना obvious नहीं था. I'm a middle-aged man living in a big city. Right, so a friend of ours wrote this book a decade ago. If you haven't read it, please read it. Aniruddha was incredibly prescient. He nailed this trend to perfection in this book. 10 साल पहले ये किताब लिखा, right? Nandita, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so throughout the same travels that we go across, and we keep asking factory owners, entrepreneurs, what is your gender ratio in the factory? Just a normal, hygiene question. And I kid you not, every time that we asked be it any company, they always said that women are doing better, we are hiring more women. And I said, okay, why is that? How is that happening? So I tried to go deeper into it. And I stumbled upon this. I mean, I knew in a way that girls were obviously doing better even 10 years ago when it came to education in terms of the past percentage rates that they scored in 10th and 12th standard. So it's generally available. It's a well-established fact.
By the way, ये मैं UK में बड़ा हुआ, वहाँ पे ऐसा नहीं है. This is specific to India, that, and for Nandita it's obvious as daylight कि ऐसा ही है. So this is where the gender gap kicks in. Since I grew up in the UK, there men do just as well as women. वहाँ पे men are not laggards, whereas here the data she's saying is it's obvious to her that men are laggards.
I'm not saying that, but okay. So then I said, okay, just let's take more recent data, and there is All India Survey for Higher Education where they publish data for 11th, 12th and university graduation, again for gender based, basically male and female, so gross enrollment ratios. It turns out more women are getting enrolled in even the higher education. Forget about just secondary education, which is what we used to think. They are getting enrolled in great numbers even at the higher education level, so until university. It's remarkable. And what we also found to a caste angle over here, where SC STs are women, and especially women are doing much better.
Incredible.
The rates have gone more.
So we'll publish this data in the book. SC ST women absolutely killing it, ripping away, right? So women are pulling away at every level of the education system, primary through to university, more girls than boys. And as Nandita said, pass rates are far higher. And then SC ST women are the real superstars in this. They're doing even better than the normal Indian, the average Indian women. So then the piece then we needed to figure out is that if women are better educated, फायदा क्या है इसका? Because one conventional point, पढ़ाई लिखाई का कोई फायदा नहीं है, वैसे ही time pass है. But the results are, the data is suggesting something different.
Yeah, so we looked at the RBI data, which obviously they also give across geographical locations as well as gender wise. So it turns out that average ticket size in women's accounts, bank accounts, is higher in urban and metropolitan areas, and in metropolitan areas that's as high as 14%. So women have on an average 14% higher amounts in their bank accounts than men do. Actually, if you look at the World Bank data as well, women also have higher number of accounts. So women have more number of accounts than men do.
This is in India, so
this is in India. Women have more money in their accounts than men do. Yes.
Just just two questions on this. One is that isn't there data about higher unemployment among women than men?
I will get to that.
So there is such data. So just to be clear on what we know for sure from data and where the gaps are. What we know for sure is the education piece, right? Plenty of data that women are in a different league to men on education. And we also have plenty of RBI data that whether it's delinquencies, bank balances, numbers of accounts, women are also in a different league. The beach wala piece, right? Education clear hai, paisa clear hai. Education clear hai, wealth clear hai. Women are doing better financially and they're doing better educationally. The beach wala piece on jobs, the data is a little fuzzy there. And you want to reply to Neil's question?
There are two aspects to it. The first is if you look at the overall PLFS data, which is the Periodic Labour Force Survey data, the overall LFPR, this Labour Force Participation Rate for women, that has been going down. And I agree, I think everyone agrees that it's been a troubling cause of concern. If you, however, stratify that by age groups, you get a very good insight there, and I think that is missed by most often by people. What that stratification tells you is that the unemployment, the participation rate has gone down in the 15 to 24 category. Now, if you're saying on the one hand, women are getting more educated, they're staying in the education system longer because it takes time for you to get your masters and your postgrad done. If you're saying that on one hand, and you're saying that they're not getting employed, obviously, I mean, it doesn't make sense.
So basically, 25 ke upar, if you take 25 ke upar, the LFPR has improved substantially in the last decade. So if you take the, so remember our median age is 28. So therefore, the fact that women are studying more, we think is dragging the LFPR down. If all you do is adjust for that, it shows rising LFPR, which is then consonant with what we hear from factory owners, CEOs of banks, and the RBI paise ka data, right? Because the chauvinistic explanation of this is, I'm sure many people have heard that, is nahi man to spend kar raha hai, woman bichari ko save karne ka mauka mil raha hai, right? Which is, I don't think, I mean, Neil, you're a personal finance correspondent. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence of this, but the standard Indian male response is, kharche to main hi kar raha hu, to isliye savings uske account mein dikh raha hai. That we don't think stacks up. And it's even more interesting. You go to places like Indore, Kolhapur, Jabalpur, the disparity between women bank account balance and men ka even higher hai, right? And the fact that RBI is showing that women have more bank accounts than men, and RBI is showing delinquency rates of women are half that of men, right? Now, just to move on to why is this a big deal? It's a big deal because we want to make money out of it, right? We want to make money from the fact that women are making money, right? So I'm not going to go through all the examples. Let's just take one example, right? We discussed the whole challenger concept, right? And I think the beauty of smart CEOs is to take mega trends and join them, right? So all credit to the team at Trent. They were doing reasonably, they were doing well with West Side. I think West Side is, this is a 999 rupees ka West Side trouser. For middle class men and women like those in this room, West Side was a preferred place to buy decent, affordable clothing, right? Apologies if I've offended anyone's sense of fashion, but mera theek ho jata hai wahan pe. It's 999 mere liye affordable price point hai. But 4 years ago, I think they clocked the changes. They clocked that a new strata of women were coming through who wanted affordable fashion. And the conventional Indian view was then, these are mutually contradictory terms, right? Oxymoron, affordable fashion. I think all credit to Venkataslu and the team at Trent that said, nahi, affordable fashion is not an oxymoron, it can be done. So their official statements now tell me that they're opening one store a day, 20,000 square feet ka store, har roz ek khul raha hai, right? In spite of opening one store a day, this is Zudio, har roz ek Zudio ka dukaan khul raha hai, chota dukaan nahi, 20,000 square feet ka khul raha hai. In spite of that, sales per store is climbing, right? If you're opening at this metronomic rate, remember this conventional theory is new stores will take time to gestate, and hence sales per store will go down. Zudio sales per store are climbing. So our consumer team locked into this, and I think Rakshit, where is he gone? I think he was there. I think last July Rakshit bought Trent for CCP, and we were obviously, people called up and said, "Boss, do you not know? P nahi dekha aapne iska," right? We didn't want to say आपने structural change नहीं देखा, because before our team bought Trent, we visited several towns in India where local apparel retailers said when Trent or Zudio enters a town, 40% सेल घट जाता है लोकल apparel retailer का, right? So again the same construct. Challenger is Trent here, plebeian is the local दुकानदार, and perhaps a ruler is, you could argue West Side is West Side is the ruler. So West Side is the ruler brand, Trent is the challenger brand, clearly growing faster than West Side, and the plebeian is the local Joe who's getting wiped out. Why is Zudio doing so well? At least the superficial explanation that we have is that they are turning inventory 6 times faster than the competition. Typical retailer 3 महीने में उसका inventory बिकता है, इनका 15 दिन में बिकता है, right? Now, how are they able to pull that off is the bit of research we are currently working on. This is very similar to Asian Paints, right? Asian Paints में the dealer margin is low, but the dealer turns are 4x higher. Here you're selling, I think, this is the example that I can cite. So I now buy my undergarments from Zudio, right? Each undergarment is 100 rupees. Okay. I used to buy them from Jockey, but Jockey mein entry price point is 200 rupiah, right? So it matters to me. So I've switched from Jockey ka 200 rupiah to Zudio ka 100 rupiah. Now clearly, cotton is cotton. So I'm pretty sure Zudio's margin on that is lower. But at the store level, the ROCs are higher because they're spinning that 6x faster, right? Now, how they are doing it is the mystery that Rakshit and team are trying to find. Rakshit, have you figured out why they're able to spin inventory 6x faster?
Yeah.
Can you just use a mic then, because this is breaking news. Even I don't know this. Right?
Yeah, it's nothing but relevance of the product at the right place. So correct price point.
आप यहाँ पे आ जाओ, सामने आ जाओ.
Yeah, sure.
Rakshit still wears Jockey, by the way. So, right,
Thank you, Saurabh.
It's still in the portfolio. It's still in the portfolio.
Yeah, retail is all about inventory turns. Retail is not about margins. Retail is not about just merely price points. Retail is all about inventory turns. If you can't get the relevance of the product to the customer walking in, then you won't make money because the rental costs are fixed, they are high, the staff attrition, staff costs, so on and so forth. So what Zudio has got right is one, procurement, which it benefits from West Side. That supply chain helps them understand how to get the right product to the customer. The second is the front end understanding of the consumer. And then at the store level, it's quite remarkable. They're opening around 200 stores a year. And this inventory turn is helping them make so much money that neither is there stress on the balance sheet or on the P&L. In fact, with the 200 store opening on an annual basis, they are able to increase their sales per square feet. But otherwise, logically, you would have thought when you expand square footage, it takes every new store a couple of years to settle down and mature and start generating sales per square feet of high run rate. And hence, overall sales per square feet should get dragged down when you expand store counts. Here, they are expanding store counts, as they call it, Din Dugni Raat Chaugni, and their sales per square feet is not getting dragged down.
In all fairness, whilst we are making it specific to Zudio, you wouldn't be able to do this if your roads were purane zamane ke roads, right? You're only able to do this because India's infrastructure the road network has tripled in the last 20 years, doubled in the last 10 years, right? If you can now move stuff from Tirupur to Ludhiana in 3 days, right? Tirupur to Ludhiana, आप 3 दिन में जा सकते हो. That's critical to this model working, right? You're also able to do this because आप अगर आप Salesforce लगाओ या अगर आप phone पे लगा दो inventory का tracking, right? The warehouse manager for Zudio and the producer for Zudio can track the inventory कि लाजपत नगर ब्रांच में या बोईसर ब्रांच में या थाने ब्रांच में क्या चाहिए कब चाहिए. You're able to track inventory automatically. Mobile data costs are 1/40th that of America, right? At low cost, you're tracking inventory real time, and then you've got infrastructure which enables you to. Just that no other retailer had joined the dots on the changes in the country and what they imply for a changed business model, right?
I think on the demand side, you also can reach a lot more customers through their Instagram and their, WhatsApp channels.
इनका marketing social media से है, right?
Yeah.
Right. So conventional media marketing is gone. Social media marketing चालू. ठीक है. तो ऐसे और सारे disruptive models. You wanted to ask a question? Okay.
I was just signed in a thought of conventional media marketing going.
Right. So I think Mr. Noel Tata would be, I'm sure, happy to listen to the merits of it. From our perspective as shareholders, it's interesting, right? That if you're selling a very low operating margin item, and you're making money on turns, you'll only advertise, whether on conventional or on social media, you'll only advertise if the advertisement helps ratchet up the turns. But from what we are hearing, and when we visit these stores, you can see that the strata of customer who's walking in has never ever visited a conventional air-conditioned modern department store. So effectively, you're taking the modern retail format down to people who are hitherto shopping on the footpath. So literally, the Hawaii chappal there is 100 rupiah. The perfumes and deodorants there are 70 rupees, 80 rupees. The shirts are 200, 300 rupees. The jeans are 900 rupees. So your price points are unbelievable, and therefore he's opening up a market which is not our type of 100 million people. It's more likely to be 500 million Indians who haven't hitherto had access to modern commerce, right? These are the Indians who were shopping here. These are the Indians who are shopping here, right? So what the winning businesses are figuring out कि ये तो डब्बा खाली हो गया है. ये जो लोग यहाँ पे थे, the customers who were there, they're up for grabs, right? And can you create a lean, efficient, disruptive business model which grabs the unorganized sector ka share and formalizes the informal, but at a return on capital which is attractive for investors. So back to Jumbo King Vada Pav, back to Yoleka Chai, right? Yoleka Chai, right? So let's now do the last layer of this. And as they say, fortune conspires when a country gets its act together, right? This I would say is an example of that. Just as we were getting our ducks lined up, she decided to take on the West, right? And she deciding to take on the West at this juncture is incredibly beneficial for India. Had she decided to take on the West a decade ago, I'm not so sure what we could have done, because we were rickety in various stages of disarray, right? She deciding to take on the West, and I'll use one industry as an example. She deciding to take on the West at this juncture is incredibly auspicious for India, right? Because finally, through a combination of modern infrastructure, highways, decent ports, mobile, geo, etc., we've managed to get our act together on moving things at speed. Working capital cycles in India for our investee firms have reduced by 30 days in the last decade. Now, at this juncture, China says to the West, boss, I don't like you. So what happens? As you have seen, right, critical industries move. So Apple makes around $200 billion of iPhones. They're already making 20 billion in India. They seem to have suggested they'll get it to 50. So India 3 years ago used to make 2 billion of iPhones. Now we make 20 billion, right? We seem to be on a path to 50. If you make 50 billion of iPhone, even if you assume 30% value add, because a common criticism is बाहर से आ रहा है सब कुछ. Even by the way, China में भी शुरुआत में सब कुछ बाहर से ही आया. But even if you do 30% multiplied by 50 billion, that's still $15 billion of profits added to the Indian ecosystem. And the area around Bangalore, not just Hosur, but Bangalore ka pura ORR ke aspas, is the supplier ecosystem which has cropped up for this, right? Now, unfortunately, that supply ecosystem hasn't yet IPO'd. वो सारे IPO'd आएंगे. So, for example, मेरा ये देसी iPhone है, तो ये जो metal है, this is made by a company called Indo-MIM, right? So, this metal around any iPhone it's metal dust which is molded into the shape of the iPhones. It's called metal injection molding. Indo-MIM stands for metal injection molding. It's very hard to do. So if you go to the Indo-MIM factory outside Bangalore, sub signs hai, no photography. If you do this, you're under US so and so law, you will be prosecuted, etc. Because this is highly sophisticated stuff, right? And these are not commoditized parts for the iPhone. This whole ecosystem will IPO in the next 2-3 years. These will be part of the challenger ecosystem. Okay? But let's take a challenger ecosystem which is already listed, right? So let's do one simple example. Contrast media is the dye that you drink before MRI. कलरफुल चीज पीना होता है जिससे आपका बॉडी दिखे MRI में, राइट? 90% of that was made in China till a year ago. So till a year ago, Divi's lab had halved, and we figured out that 90% of this contrast media is made in China. Our pharma team then looked up who makes it, and we realized that two of the world's largest pharma companies subcontract their manufacturing to China, and they both subcontract to the same factory in China, right? So in their infinite wisdom, दोनों एक ही factory से अपना contrast media बनाते हैं. So we then used a third-party expert network to speak to some doctors in America to ask them आपका क्या सोच है इस मुद्दे पे. They said contrast media is in shortage in many hospital systems in America. They're rationing, and this is long after COVID. This is we're talking about year ago. So we said, boss, ये तो कमाल है कि अगर two large pharma companies. Remember, most of the world's large pharma companies are clients of Divi's lab, right? So the only bit that we then had to do was, will these large pharma companies give their contrast media business to Divi's? Because if they did, तो Divi's का एक पूरा नया factory भर जाएगा. We figured out, because you can get the market size for stuff like this. Then the last bit that we had to do was just make sure that these firms are interested. These American firms are interested in switching that from China to India. So we spoke to API specialists in America. API is active pharmaceutical ingredient. That's the churn inside a dawai. And we spoke to companies who specialize in supplying API, and they gave us a very clear point of view. They said that the US drug regulator is being very clear with US pharma, saying reduce your dependence on China. Right? 90% of the world's API comes from China. So the US drug regulator is pushing American pharma ki reduce karo. Contrast media is in shortage. It's being made in China. We said inke plant mein banega. So Surakshit, when did you double the Divi's position?
December 22.
So December 22 में Divi's का position double किया. थोड़ा सा palpitation हुआ हमारे middle class कलेजे में, कुछ 2 महीने और गिरा. 2 महीने और गिरा, and people obviously क्यों डबल किया गिर रहा है, right? So we just held on, Rakshit held on, and जब चढ़ने लगा, अब लोग बोलते हैं obvious है, अब ना ही वो PE करोना शुरू हो गया है, right? So now that the third plant in 30 years was announced 14-15 months ago, Kakinada वाला plant, उसमें थोड़ा सा initial palpitation था कि भरेगा या नहीं, and over the last 3 earnings they have announced that the Kakinada plant is filling up with contrast media. Now, just to give you an opportunity scale, API is a $170-180 billion global market. China makes 100 billion. हमारा देश बनाता है 10 billion. So even if we just get 10% market share from them, our API industry doubles in the next 3 years. Now, Divi's बनाता है API. API बनाने के लिए you need intermediates. There's a whole ecosystem in Gujarat and Telangana and Andhra which makes the intermediates. We've invested in some of them. I suspect many of those companies are going to IPO in the next 3 years. Again, there are challenges, right? 5, 10, 15, 20, $30 million का profit बनता है intermediates बना के. Then intermediates and API दोनों बनाने के लिए आपको you need ceramic glass vessels in which to process the chemical. 55% of the world's ceramic glass vessels are made by these folks, right? They are the world leaders in this. 70% of India's ceramic glass vessels are made by this, right? So in this case, iPhone mein the industry is still nascent, the ecosystem. They're going to IPO over the next 5 years. But in the pharma ecosystem, many of the companies are already listed and we are investing, but I think many more IPOs are going to come from Gujarat, Telangana and Andhra in this industry. If you add up all of this, stuff from in sectors where we are strong, it looks like 10% of GDP will be added on. So 300 billion, roughly 10% of GDP gets added on to our GDP, right? So this, we couldn't have done this 10 years ago. 10 years ago, China could have gone at the West, maybe Vietnam sab kuch clean up karta. But now, for us, right place, right time. So we'll stop there. But we thought, given how far we've gone down the path and given how exciting this is, we felt it will be of mutual interest for us to share this. But as several of you have asked, this is across the country. ये सिर्फ फार्मा की स्टोरी नहीं है, ये सिर्फ फंड मैनेजमेंट की स्टोरी नहीं है, ये सिर्फ मीडिया की स्टोरी नहीं है, ये हेल्थ केयर में भी हो रहा है, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में भी हो रहा है. And the rise of the challenger, I suspect, will be the defining story of the next 10 years. And as you very eloquently put it, ma'am, it's not these guys who are cleaning up, it's the second decile, right? It's the second decile. And the economist called Joseph Schumpeter, he created this term creative destruction, right? Isko bolte hain creative destruction, right? Those who want to take this as a negative story will always say, ये देखो, दोनों से नेगेटिव स्टोरी किसी को चाहिए होता है, कुछ लोगों को डिप्रेशन का आदत होता है, वो ये लोग इस साइड फोकस करेंगे. Those who want to focus on how free markets rise, how free market democracies rise, will focus on this side, right? And I always believe it's very revealing about people's personality, more than it reveals about the economy. Because the economy is the economy. It doesn't matter what you or I think about it. It's very revealing about people's personality, whether they focus on this or they focus on this. Right? Our job is to focus on this. It took us a little later than it should have. I guess the noise around COVID threw us off, but courtesy the work done by the analysts who work under Rakshit, courtesy the work done by Nandita, last 2 साल में दिमाग के दरवाजे खुल गए और कंपाउंडिंग का इंजन चालू हो गया. Any questions, folks?
What next?
What next? What next? Next is, as I said, the next is, I mean, we are already trying our best to load up on as many of these, because these guys are going to take these guys on. If you want to make it, if you want to put a prickly question to us, and you're all entitled to, you should ask, and you will ask, and many of our clients will ask is, as the challenges rise and as the rulers get challenged, how do you know, Saurabh, how does Rakshit know what percentage of your portfolio are rulers and what percentage of our portfolio are challengers? At this juncture, what we can tell you is broadly the mental construct we are using is we are looking at, depending on whether it's a large cap portfolio, Rakshit's CCP, or Little Champs, which is our small cap portfolio. At this juncture, we're looking for companies where if it's a large company, they've clearly demarcated a separate challenger franchise, right? Zudio and West Side being the obvious example, or Tube Investments and Tube Clean Mobility being another example, right? Remember, Tube ka purana business until they created Tube Clean Mobility was auto ancillaries banana and literally tube banana. That's why it's called tube, bus ka tube, and so it was a very staid, old style manufacturing business. The Tube Clean Mobility piece is 3-wheeler EV, Bontra नाम है, चालू हो गया है. I think अगले 1-1.5 साल में पैसा भी कैश फ्लो पॉजिटिव हो जाएगा. साउथ इंडिया में लीडिंग ब्रांड है. लाइट ट्रक, EV लाइट ट्रक, EV heavy truck, and EV tractor, right? So at this juncture, the mental model is look for either ruler businesses who are creating challenger franchises, doing so frugally with clever capital allocation. Another example would be Narayan Rudyalaya and the health business, the health insurance business. Why don't you talk about that? It's very interesting. A hospital launching a low cost health insurance. 1,000 रुपए में 10,000 रुपए में कितना कवर दे रहे हैं?
Up to 1 crore of surgeries.
हाँ जी. तो very interesting. Hospital launching a challenger business in the insurance space.
Yeah, so the core hospital business standard is IPDs and OPDs, right? IPD plus OPD. Narayana also had that. The first challenger business that they created was that let's do integrated, just like you would have seen Apollo Pharmacy, Apollo Diagnostics, Apollo OPDs separate from the hospitals, just that they are not truly integrated at the same place, back-end systems are not integrated. Narayana here is doing an integrated version of that. And then came the topmost layer, the most recent layer, which was in January this year, they got the insurance license. And now they have launched their product where you get clocked into the Narayana ecosystem as a patient. You have to pay a certain, call it a subscription fee, which is like an annual payment. And then the doctor treating you will be Narayana's, the insurer reimbursing you will be Narayana's, in a way not reimbursing you, cashless. What this takes away is conflict of interest, risk, which all patients used to fear. that the doctor is increasing the number of things on the bill only to make more money, the insurer will probably not reimburse me fully because he will say, well, doctor, this was not needed, and I'll get screwed in the whole process. Am I being treated rightfully or ethically and in the best possible manner or not, right? By having the insurance, IPD, as well as the funnel, which is the OPD, pharmacy, diagnostics, all in-house, all this conflict of interest goes away. And if they scale up well, if the execution is good, then I think this will be a massive differentiation in hospitals.
Similar example would be Asian Paints and the home decor, right? Challenger business. Home decor conventional model kya tha? Say in our house in Powai, when we needed it to be done up, there was a local artisan called Motilal. We would call Motilal. Motilal would come in with a pencil behind his ear. He would sort of suck his teeth and say, ye lena hai, wo lena hai. Then either me or my wife would go with him to Ghatkopar. We would buy the relevant things, come back. Motilal would sort of have sip his tea, do this over 3 days, at the end of which all of us would be at the end of our tether. That was the conventional model, right? And I'd probably take half a day off from work and so on and so forth. The Asian Paints home decor model, Rakshit, you have benefited, you're a customer, can you explain how it works?
Yeah, I did try it out. Execution is the biggest challenge. Asian Paints says that, look, we'll be the integrator of coordination with all the contractors, whether it be plumber, carpenter, electrician, painter, so on and so forth, masons. We'll be the one-stop shop to which the customer has to interact, with which the customer has to interact, and we'll ensure timely delivery of project completion, quality standards, bare minimum ensured, so that no cutting the corners is happening on the material. And in the process, we are also doing a lot of non-paint stuff. We'll also make some money by pushing through our own, let's say fabric. They've got Pure as a product. They've got some lightings. They've got some window frames, so on and so forth. And hence we'll make money. Customer, it's a win-win for the customer, win-win for the contractor. The contractor doesn't have to now keep hunting for the next lead. Usually what used to happen was the contractor would hunt for leads. Whenever he would get a new lead, he would deploy 2 laborers there from one of his existing projects. And to the existing project homeowner, he'll say, oh, labor ghar chali gayi fasal kaatne. As a result, एक हफ्ते के लिए आपका project थोड़ा delay चलेगा क्योंकि कम labor है आपके घर में, right? So the contractor doesn't have to jeopardize on quality in order to get or timeliness in order to get new leads. The new leads are generated by Asian Paints for the contractor. The customer gets the win-win, and Asian Paints makes money. So similar to what you is doing with
the if you think about it, right? The challenger businesses, right? As you said, what next? The challengers businesses that we see in the stock market, you can broadly put them in 2 groups. One is you're giving a hitherto unserved customer base an affordable product, Zudio, okay? Hitherto unserved by the formal apparel manufacturers, right? इसके पहले formal apparel manufacturers का price point were too high for the lower income segment. तो Zudio एक lower income segment को एक high quality product दे रहा है at an affordable price. That's one way to challenge. The other way to challenge is to turn to the existing customer base and give them a superior product. I would suggest that Narayana is an example of that. Narayana is using modern technology to turn to the existing folks of Bangalore and saying, आप hospital तो पहले भी जाते थे, health insurance तो पहले भी use करते थे, but हमारा लीजिए attractive price point है और both the healthcare and the insurance is bundled so that the conflict of interest goes away, right? Similarly, Asian Paints, Saurabh Mukherjee, Rakshit Ranjan were anyway using artisans to do up their house, but this is an easier product for us to buy because it's an app and they're formalizing the product, right? And I think this aspect, right, that challengers can go 2 ways. They can either bring in unserved people and serve them, or they can go to the existing customer base and build and improve the product. ये हमारे industry के लिए भी लागू होता है. So if I take our example, till 3 years ago, for someone like me, right, investing in American stocks, the only route was PP Fasca वो वाला जो प्रोडक्ट है जहाँ पे इंडिया अमेरिका ब्लेंडेड है. I didn't really have the wherewithal to call up an American fund manager and put up, $5 million. Anyway, LRS में तो allowed भी नहीं है $5 million. And hence, I had a pension fund in the West from my days in the West. And उसके अलावा मेरा Western investment था नहीं. Then the combination of new technology, gift, new regulations have made it low cost for us to set up a small office in gift, put traders, analysts there, and turn to our client base and say, for whatever is the PMS investment in India, we can do a PMS for you in America, right? And we're not catering to the super rich. We're catering to middle class folks who are putting in, say, $70,000, $80,000 into American stocks, right? And I suspect you'll see this in media, you'll see this in financial services. The rise of modern technology lowers the cost structure if you want to offer a superior customer experience, or it allows you to go and serve a new segment of society which was hitherto unserved. If you want to look beyond subsidiaries of big companies and you want to look at challenger franchises which are not just subsidiaries of big companies, I would point you towards this company. This company का in fact showroom भी पास है, आप जाके देख सकते हो. It's called Carousel. So the showroom is वो जो CJ House के सामने नीचे जहाँ पे रोल्स रॉयस का शोरूम होता था, आई थिंक वहाँ, हाँ एट्रिया मॉल, हाँ जी हाँ, आई फॉरगेट दैट. सो दिस इज वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, राइट? सो most of us have used stainless steel sinks all our life, right? And there's a leader in stainless steel sinks. It's unlisted. It's called Nirali, right? Nirali is the leader in stainless steel. It's like the kind of Xerox to photocopying kind of thing. So this company used to be a JV with the world leader in quartz sinks. There's a company called Schott, SCHOTT. They're the world leader in quartz sinks. The reason only two companies have figured out how to make quartz sinks is it's a kind of tricky chemical mixture. You got to get it right, otherwise the quartz sinks doesn't quite work out. So they used to do white labeled manufacturing for Schott through 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then around a decade back, they decided to go their own way. Okay? And they do white label manufacturing for IKEA, for B&Q in the Western world. But interestingly, given all the changes in our country, where is the fastest growing market for quartz sink? Back in India, right? So now already 2% of India's sinks are now quartz rather than stainless steel. क्यों ऐसा है? Quartz is twice the price of a stainless steel sink, right? Quartz sinks are twice the price of a stainless steel sink, but it doesn't make noise. So if you're entertaining guests and the बर्तन is being धोड in the kitchen, right? कितनी ज़रूरत है कि आपका conversation disrupt हो रहा है, right? पहला, it doesn't make noise. Secondly, it doesn't scratch, doesn't stain. तो अगर आप हल्दी तेल वगैरह का चिंता कर रहे हो. Thirdly, most importantly, the aesthetics of the kitchen don't get messed up. Suppose you made canary yellow or whatever bubblegum pink kitchen, पूरा मॉड्यूलर बनाया आपने एशियन पेंट्स के साथ, फिर आपने स्टेनलेस स्टील का सिंक लगा दिया, तो पूरा मजा ही बर्बाद हो गया. Now you can choose a quartz sink of exactly the color as the rest of your sink, right? Now it obviously plays to the women theme as well, right? As women make money, they want to show the world that we are rising in the world, right? They're not going to buy, I'm happy to be contradicted, but they're not going to buy a mota sa watch to show, dekho mere paas kitne paise hai. They're going to do stuff which makes them happy. So the rise of the quartz sink is part of that phenomenon. And the challenger here is a conventional brand which has dominated for decades. I think from the time I was born, Nirali has been the dominant brand, right? So if you ever want to join Nandita as she goes for store visits to watch this, it is fascinating, right? You can go to Atria Mall whenever you want, but you can also go to places like Dehradun, Hyderabad, Amritsar and walk into their showrooms, and you just politely hang around and watch what happens. Typically, a woman will come dragging a man behind her. They will inevitably choose the most expensive offering in the store. बाहर गाड़ी छोटी सी होगी. You might think अरे ये तो बड़े रईस लोग होंगे. गाड़ी छोटी सी होगी, but they'll choose कोई 2 लाख का offering, and then it will be financed through Bajaj Finance, right? And it's fascinating to watch both aspiration, modern finance. Bajaj Finance, as you know, underwrites in 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes में, and they will also throw in a They'll also throw in, अगर आप सिंक ले ही रहे हो तो वाटर फिल्टर तो आप ले लो, और वाटर फिल्टर ले रहे हो तो आप यूरेका फॉर्ब्स का एक्वा गाड़ी तो लोगे ना, और अगर आप ले ही रहे हो तो आप जो 27,000 का नया मॉडल है वो लो. एंड पीपल डोंट नीड एनी कन्विंसिंग, दे आर एक्चुअली आस्किंग. सो आई वाज विद नंदिता इन देहरादून एंड we'd gone to the local Chroma. Mother, father, daughter walked in. So they literally walked in like this, ऐसे फोन देखते हुए, ये जो 27,000 का ये कहाँ पे है? So this lady said, नहीं अभी तक आया नहीं है. अरे जब आएगा तो फोन करना, राइट? 27,000 का, that's the most, 25,000 तक था, राइट? And we gave the feedback to the Eureka Forbes people कि आप फटाफट 27,000 का पहुंचाओ, देहरादून में लोगों को 25,000 का नहीं चाहिए, 27,000 का चाहिए, राइट? And they were so clear, they had seen it online and they wanted the premium brand. And again, I watched them walk out into the car park, छोटी गाड़ी, कोई ऐसा शोशा वाला गाड़ी नहीं. And you would think 27,000, महंगा, but no, I mean the rise of
Under the counter water purifier for carousel sinks, again, that also we saw. So you can actually take a faucet out of the sink itself and the water purifier will be under the counter. So you won't be able to see. So that's the new trend.
By the way, carousel perfect challenger. Marcellus जितना है profitability, यही वो range है ना, $6 million to $60 million. That's the challenger range. And if you see the product, it's classy. I mean, go to Atria Mall for your classy product. IKEA में भी यही सिंक है. IKEA में ब्रांड उनका है, it's white labeled, but इंडिया में इनका ब्रांड है, right? So challengers are coming forth. Our job, Rakshit's job, my job, is to look for these challengers and load up on them. That's where I think the emphasis shifts. The new gods in India are, whether you're a large company or a small company, the new gods are those who are challenging conventional norms around how business is done, conventional business models and the efficacy of those. Why are they being able to challenge it? Because the rise of mobile commerce, the rise of UPI, the rise of a good quality infrastructure system changes product economics, right? It changes product economics. It makes it viable for a company in Morbi, in Gujarat, Rajkot ke paas hai, for a company in Morbi to become the world leader in producing quartz sinks for the Western market. It so happens back in India also, there's high demand for this. It makes it viable for a West side, which was selling to you and me at price points 999 ऐसे चीजों के लिए, for the same company to turn around and say, we will sell similar trouser at $499 and still make a good roki by spinning the inventory faster using mobile and using modern infrastructure. And that change is the change we lost sight of, in all fairness, through 2020, 21, 22, courtesy the hard work the team has put in. Last 2 साल में अकल ठिकाने आ गए, but there is a long way to go. There's a big journey ahead of us, for all of us. And I think it bodes well for the country. These are better models, more efficient models, and the customer's interest. The customer's interest is looked after more in this sort of environment with this constant challenge. इसमें एक जो मेरे को चिंता है, there are in some parts of the ecosystem where the regulator's hand is a little heavy-handed. वहाँ पे मेरे को लग रहा है कि regulator might stymie innovation, right? So we've got various regulators in our industry. Some of the regulators in our industry are customer friendly, but some of the regulators in our industry are very focused on prudential norms, because उनको डर लगता है कि कुछ ज़्यादा innovation चालू कर देंगे, कुछ फट ना जाए, right? And that I think is it's a tough judgment call for them. But from your perspective, when you look at our industry, financial services broadly, wherever you're seeing regulators being customer friendly, the reason they can now be so is that the changes in the country, the ability to access information costlessly, the ability to get transactions, accounts set up costlessly, right, with very low friction costs, changes the product economics. Right, the way a manufacturer like us reaches out to customers is changing, the way we sign up customers is changing, the whole frictional costs of communicating changing, and thereby coming back to the question, the moats around having large physical infrastructure arguably change, and that creates work for us to do on, are we investing in Purana style paradigms जहाँ पे मोट वॉज हमने 50 दुकान लगा दिए या 2000 दुकान लगा दिए हैं, और आर वी इन्वेस्टिंग इन न्यू स्टाइल पैराडाइम्स वेयर द मोट इज दिमाग, IP embedded in code, in perhaps AI, and rapid processing of transactions. हाँ जी, कौन महालक्ष्मी?
So again, sort of the point that you're making with respect to the benefits of efficiency, digitization, and all of that is a very important trend, definitely. But again, some of the examples you talk about, for example, Narayana Hridayalaya hospital chain getting into insurance. I mean, we've seen this movie play out before, right? At one time, we used to call these unrelated diversification, which is doomed to fail. How is this, I mean, exactly the same story played out in Pantaloon retail, all kinds of number of customers so high, we could sell financial services to them. And you and I definitely know that insurance is everything about risk management and nothing about customers. So that's one. Secondly, even Zudio, again, this is, of course, it's incredible that they have identified this mid-market opportunity and expanded very aggressively. But this model is also, I mean, it's perfected by Landmark in Max. So when you evaluate modes like these, it's like McDonald's goes and puts up a store and Burger King doesn't have to do research to put up where the next store should be, right? So all of these centers, wherever the profitability creeps up, the next thing Max will come and, Aditya Birla will come. So that sort of will immediately challenge the first.
This is so much fun. So Lakshmi, मैं पहला वाला लेता हूँ, दूसरा वाला आप लीजिए, दूसरा वाला harder है तो आप लीजिए, मैं easy वाला लेता हूँ. So Mahalakshmi is right that look at any large company will say हम पांच तरीके diversification कर रहे हैं. We got 5 different initiatives, and in an environment where the stock market is hot, private equity is waiting to pour in money, a large company can diversify swiftly and as Mahalakshmi has alluded to, this has been done in the past. This movie has played out, and the movie has more often than not ended with a sad ending, right? I'm not saying that this time it's all different. What our job is to do is say amongst these people, amongst the large companies who are setting up challengers or amongst large companies who are diversifying, who are the people doing it frugally, right? Frugality is king in our world. It's ironical that even though India is twice as rich today than it was a decade ago and capital is abundantly available, the companies who are expanding well are the companies who are expanding both lean with a lean cost structure, operating expenses low rakh rahe hain, and they're being very clever, very frugal on how they're using capital, right? So what we are trying to avoid, and I think so far we've been successful, is avoiding investing in companies who are setting up lots of new businesses and constantly tokoing out new equity issuance. वो नहीं करना. That doesn't work. That movie, as you're rightly saying, doesn't end well. If you're not disciplined in how you use capital, you're not disciplined in cost control, you're not going to do well. So just to use Zudio as an example, they have they're opening a store a day, 20,000 square feet. They're using their organic cash generation from West Side, and Zara chota business hai, but primarily from West Side, to finance the Zudio ka expansion. We haven't discussed Star Bazaar in the interest of it, but Star Bazaar we think is a equally disruptive format. It's currently in Bombay, Pune, Hyderabad, या Bombay, Pune, Bangalore.
Maharashtra, Karnataka.
हाँ, तो वहाँ पे है, but Star Bazaar is equally disruptive. How many equity raises have they done in the last 5 years? नहीं किया है, right? तो देखिए, 5 years ago Zudio didn't really exist in its current shape. Star Bazaar was a kind of moribund business. Zudio is now a store a day opening, 20,000 square feet, and Star Bazaar is on the cusp of breaking even, we reckon. They haven't had to raise new capital. Similarly, अगर आप Tube को देखो, Velayan and team का काम देखो, they bought CG Power at the height of COVID wave 1 from bankruptcy for I think 800 crore, $100 million के आसपास था. Tube Investments acquired CG Power at the height of the first wave of COVID, bankruptcy से. CG Power का market cap आज की डेट में I think $10 billion, ठीक है? तो आपने now Tube owns 58% of that, so $100 million लगाया, उसको 5.8 billion बना दिया, right? So I think it's a very relevant point you made. We cannot. I don't think anybody out there can afford to go around and say challenges are and let's go and spray money at any large company. I think the imperative because it's a more competitive economy, yes, there are challenge or opportunities, but it's also a more competitive economy today than it was a decade ago, and hence we have to be disciplined about where we put money. दूसरा सवाल मलेश्वी का.
Yeah, I think in one regard, both the questions are connected, which is that if you don't build deeply moated businesses out of a capital allocation, then competition will come and take it away. To begin with, I'll give you a broad framework within which the answer sits, and then maybe some examples of Landmark versus Zudio and others. So, first and foremost, if you've not got capital allocation discipline, which means you will seed a few businesses. Some of those will have great unit economics. Scale up only those businesses. Don't scale up everything. That discipline is needed. And until you figure out great unit economics, do not put enormous amount of capital behind those businesses, right? In many of the examples where this pray and pray into challenges doesn't work, is because you scaled up everything, hoping that scale will bring unit economics. It actually doesn't always work. Most often than not, doesn't work. First unit economics, then scale is one solution. And then associated with that is, once you've built a great business, it is generating a lot of cash. Either you're able to sustain the moats, deepen the moats through incremental capital allocation in a manner that competition is ineffective, or if the competition is effective, then by then you would have created 5 more businesses, some of which would have become the core of today and tomorrow. And even if this one goes away, so let me give you some examples. So, Tube started with cycles, right? Till a decade ago, they used to pump a lot of capital behind cycles, and then came a point around 8 to 9 years. Bicycles, yes, those cycles. And then came a point they said, well, look, this is not as moated as it used to be. Competition has come in, TAM has saturated, and hence we need to let go of these businesses. So on the same land where bicycles used to get manufactured, today they are trying to do their EV business capex. The good thing is that the EV business capex is low because the land was already acquired, right? And it had already been amortized, etc. On the P&L, on the balance sheet, and hence the capex costs are minimal. And then their optics might not work, so they're trying to make lenses and ADAS of the Hyundais of the cars, etc. That might not work. They'll do CDMO like DVs. If that doesn't work, they'll do 3-wheelers. They'll not scale up massively without unit economics being there. Now coming to trend. So think about it like this. When Zudio scaled up, Reliance's trends had 2,500 stores across the country. Even today, Zudio is only 600 stores. Trends is 2,500 stores. It's still a 4x bigger format, similar price points, very, very similar price points, and still Zudio was able to succeed. But here is
one way to sort of think of this test, right? So it's a test, right? Is can the promoter, whichever company, whichever sector, can the promoter generate a return on capital above a cost of capital? Because ultimately, all of us, we don't care aap challenger ho, ruler ho, plebeian ho, kaun ho boss, aap return on capital. Are you able to generate that alongside decent growth? So around a couple of years ago, when this dawned on us that rather than obsessing about आपका 10 साल का track record है या 40% ROC है, if we just simplify it and say we are interested in investing in companies with healthy ROC, decent growth, believable accounts, and we said it'll take Rakshit, myself, Nandita, will take us time to identify the entire new generation. We reached out to Krishnan. Krishnan at that time was in Morningstar. Krishnan, do you mind coming up here? He used to work for Morningstar, and before Morningstar, Krishnan used to work in DE Shaw, right? So Krishnan is our. अब उस तरफ से आ जाइए. So Krishnan is our quant analyst. He's usually hemmed in by numbers rather than by cameramen, but it's good to be hemmed in by cameramen as well. We're grateful that the cameramen are here. So we hired Krishnan. आप एक माइक ले लीजिए कहीं से, रक्षित दे दीजिए. And our ask of him was, देखो बॉस हमको कोड नहीं आता, हमारे को क्वांट आता ही नहीं है, हम IIM भी नहीं गए, तो आप ये जो पैराडाइम है, the paradigm of a new India, where companies with good growth, ROC above cost of capital, clean financials, can you identify them using quant, and can you create a portfolio? So we created one. First we invested our money and then clients' money, and as you'd expect, he's outperformed our conventional portfolios over a 2-year period as 2:1. In the recent months, as our portfolios have been similar to his, we've caught up. But it's worth explaining how you came up with the construct. In effect, before we figured out all of this qualitatively, you had figured this out quantitatively for Meritor Q.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, a lot of, what we are doing in Meritor Q again is, it's kind of I would say it encapsulates what we have already done in other strategies, again, essentially, if you look at, all our other strategies, we're looking at good, well-run companies, which are, again, we have clean accounts, they're profitable at the same time. But what we ensure in Meritor Q is we're also looking at valuations, right? So good, well-run companies, clean accounts, but you're also looking at valuation. So again, most of what I was inspired by is, Maslo's philosophy. Again, what we have been doing in other strategies. Again, what this strategy does is basically take that philosophy, encapsulate that within a quant approach.
But just to be clear, where he did an important tweak, we were obsessed about ROC has to be high. He said ROC has to be above a hygiene level, right? And that's a very important distinction. If you obsess about high ROC as a kind of benchmark for a business's greatness, then you miss out on the rise of the challenger. If you say that as long as ROC is above cost of capital and you are reinvesting vast sums of money for growth, Tube being a classic example. Reliance point of view is I'm going to generate a good ROC in the Purana businesses, bicycles and auto ancillaries, and the Tube business, and that cash then goes into the EV business, right? So overall ROC doesn't look very pretty. It's above cost of capital, but you're firing up a growth engine, right? So Krishnan, when he did it through his quant process and his portfolio started going great guns, that's when we clocked that this is an important psychological shift we have to make. It took us another year of research to figure out ये क्यों हो रहा था, and the Q is what we are getting at. So we're neither investing ourselves nor are we advocating anybody else out there invest in conglomerates that are spraying money in multiple ventures and overall pushing return on capital below cost of capital. I don't think that's going to work. But what is clearly working and what we hadn't clocked till 2 years ago was generating a 30% ROC has no virtue by itself unless you're using those surplus resources to jack up growth in the franchise.
So that is the balance between the growth and profitability that you identify.
So nicely put, the needle has shifted more towards the growth side rather than the ROC side, right? And perhaps, if I'm charitable to people like us, we had lived through pura 2G spectrum, Colgate and Colgate and COAL Gate, Commonwealth Games. We lived through the pura Yes Bank, ILFS. Then we lived through COVID. And after 10-11 years of pounding, we had become very defensively focused. कि high ROC चाहिए, growth ठीक ठाक रहे, we are happy. And in the last 4 years, as we are showing here, the country has pivoted. As the country has pivoted, smart promoters, smart CEOs have said the opportunities are so abundant now. The opportunities are so abundant now that let's focus on juicing up growth, keep ROC above a hygiene level. Mano 15% is the hygiene level. And his algo is literally his code does that. Krishnan codes in Python. He takes thousands of companies, he codes in Python. Give me ROC above cost of capital, give me growth, give me clean accounts, and give me a decent valuation. And every 3 months you rebalance that, right? Now, one benefit of Krishnan coming was Krishnan taught Nandita Python. Nandita used Python to query the income tax data to produce this chart, right? So, quant becomes economics, courtesy, brains rippling through. And again, this is an example. You don't have to work in some colossal house to have brain power of IIT, IIM, जो भी हो, local economics का graduate हो, LSE का graduate हो. It doesn't matter what your pedigree is. Are you using your दिमाग? Are you awake and alive to the fact that एक पूरी नई दुनिया बन रही है?
So I have a couple of questions actually.
go on.
Number one, I wanted to ask you about the vertical integration. I mean, you talk about disruptive models and companies which are expanding, having good supply chain, etc. So are you looking at companies which essentially have that kind of capital or moat, which can do vertical integration, like for example the Asian Paints example or the hospital example which you gave. So that is my first question that I had for you.
So let me quantify the answer. The kind of companies that we were significantly more oriented towards previously, I would say 80% of the large cap portfolio were more linear compounders, as in same business, 40% ROC, half of it reinvested, half of it dividended out. And that half of the reinvested part used to deliver the compounding, right? Today, more than 50, probably 60 to 70% of this portfolio today by allocation is investing into companies with ROCs of 20, 25, 30, but reinvestment rates 80, 90, 100. And that higher reinvestment rate is in peripheral areas where you can build moats. Now, those peripheral areas are not just adjacent products and geographies. That is an easy periphery. You can get actually by linear compounding as well. The peripheral areas are related businesses. So for instance, what a Narayana is doing, what a Trent is doing, they're all related businesses to each other. So Star Bazaar and Zudio don't appear related from a distance.
You could argue that the examples you gave are true, but to echoing Mahalakshmi's point, you could argue that tubes diversification has been somewhat unrelated, and therefore I was going to say that in some cases companies are doing vertical integration. Asian Paints, I think you're right to say, is an example of vertical integration, but it's also likely that companies that were hitherto vertically integrated, they get disrupted as the low transaction costs and the low infrastructure costs now make it possible to outsource and get a third party to do what you hitherto did in-house. So for example, as the luggage industry matures, right, as the suitcases, right, the wheels, the trolleys, the handles of our stroller bags, we might end up seeing one separate company emerge to make the payyas of all our bags, because the boom in luggage, just making the payyas and the stroller bags of all of this could end up being a $1 billion revenue opportunity, right? So as the economy grows and as transaction costs fall, it could well be that hitherto vertically industries splinter. And at the same token, as smart promoters like Asian Paints or Trent get their dimag spinning more and more, they could consolidate what was hitherto unconsolidated. Hitherto paint आप एक जगह से लेते थे, tile कहीं और से लेते थे, wallpaper, and then you would call up a mason. Now Asian Paints is saying, in my home decor construct, I'm going to give you everything in one bundle. So both ways. I don't think we can give you a definitive view on this. What we have learned so far is, because the environment is more competitive, the balance of emphasis shifts to growth rather than ROC. As first big learning. Because the environment is more competitive, operating margins and ROCs are going to be under greater pressure now than was the case in India 10 years ago. You can also see this in overall CPI coming down. I think the customer is going to be the winner in this. Right, you're creating a more efficient competitive economy. CPI comes down, but uska corporate corollary is ROCE's operating margins come under pressure as companies emphasize growth at the expense of profitability. And the third piece is inefficient companies, inefficient capital allocators, promoters who have hitherto sprayed and prayed, they'll be spraying less and praying more.
But sir, you also mentioned about companies raising equity. So for example, if a company wants to expand into growth and wants capital for that, and it is not able to generate profit because it wants to reinvest in the company. So this is the kind of battle, which one company has. If I want to grow as a company, I would infuse in more capital. But listening to you about the equity thing, so I'm just not able to figure that
stuff.
So
it's very similar to, so let's take a personal finance example. If I spray away all my wealth on partying, and then I go to a bank and say lend me money to buy a car, it's probably not a good decision on the bank's part to give Saurabh new capital, given that he's shown himself to be profligate in his spending, right? But on the other hand, if I generate savings, reinvest in the stock market, build my balance sheet, and then one fine day my better half decides that we need a larger flat to live in, and we go to a bank and seek a mortgage for a slightly better lifestyle, I would reckon I'm a good credit risk for the bank. Similarly, in corporate life, if a company that's never generated return on capital above 14-15%, कभी किया ही नहीं जिंदगी में, that guy comes to the stock market in a booming bull run and say और पैसे दे दो, I'm not so sure we in Marcellus are going to give him money. But if a company that's always kept ROC 18, 19, 20% and higher, हमेशा return on capital, cost of capital के ऊपर रखा है, and that guy comes and says that I can see all these opportunities, please give me 1,000 crores. I think people like us will be predisposed to listen, right? So just like in personal finance, you can have two home loan borrowers, one of whom is a disastrous credit, the other is a good credit. Similarly, I think in equity investing, in this bull market, we are getting both types of raises. Some companies are raising because they have been indisciplined, sprayed their capital around, and others who are raising are saying, I've never seen opportunities like this. Here's what I'm going to do. On that business, I already generated 20% ROCE, but that will only give you 100, 200 crores. Can you give me 1,000 crores? And I want to go and hit the accelerator on that. Right? By the way, that sort of capital raise, whether from private equity or the stock market, makes it imperative for us to identify these companies quicker, because that access to capital is accelerating the challenger engine. Accelerating growth is accelerating the challenger engine. I just want to do a quick time check with the good folks at Ad Factors.
Yes.
Yeah, ji, boliye.
So what we can do is we can continue the discussion over lunch.
Just
And
one last question, sir, please. If I
one
may
last
just
question,
squeeze in.
yeah.
Yeah, sir, very good, amazing presentation. But just one thing I wanted to ask, all of these presentation, the numbers were around the profitability area, the PAT essentially. So how do you look at the cash flows of the company? Do you count that in, or what's your view on that?
So if you can, we have cash flows on listed companies. Beyond listed companies, I think we get another 5,000 companies for cash flows from a database called ACE Equity. Unfortunately, उसके आगे 10,000 companies के आगे इंडिया में कैश फ्लो डेटा मिलता नहीं है. You're absolutely right. Cash flow is the real god, right? ROC above 15%, by the way, is the same as saying ROC above 15% is the same as saying free cash flow generating, right? So if we had data on 1.4 million companies ka cash flows, I think Nandita wouldn't be sitting here, should be crunching that data and generating insight.
Even if we do have that data, the problem over there is because I looked at the PAT data, and at the PAT level it says, see that most of it, like 60% of the entire.
Yeah, fair point. So your point is PAT में फट जाता है, तो cash flow का point ही नहीं है. I think where she was coming at was amongst the 6,000 challengers, so 5,000 challengers, 800 rulers, amongst them, who are the better cash generators. That data we don't yet have. We're trying to get that. Hopefully we'll find a database which gives that. But you're right, absolutely right. Links to Rakshit's point. The companies who are generating lots of cash as they go about disrupting the economy are the real kings of the future. But by the same token, it's operating cash flow that's arguably more interesting today than free cash flow. See, हमारा पुराना mindset था कि free cash flow भगवान है. Right? Now we're realizing that if you're doing lots of CFI, right? Then even if you're doing low FCF, that's fine because you're growing. Okay.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
So just quickly, let me make some quick introductions before we head off to lunch.
Yes.
So we've got a couple of colleagues at the back and we'll go off to lunch together. Where are we going for lunch, by the way?
8th floor.
So 8th floor, you're all welcome to join us. So Pramod is our head of business development. He's the guy who has the tough job of convincing people to invest with us. Arindam runs our Western portfolio. So he runs the portfolio which invests in Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and ASML. So Krishnan migrated from Morningstar to Marcellus, intra-country. Arindam migrated from New York to Andheri East, multinational migration. Arindam bought Western disruption, Krishnan bought Indian quant disruption. But the reason I wanted to highlight them is both these styles of investing have not only worked for us, we made money from that, but we have learned enormously from how Krishnan uses numbers to invest and how Arindam has invested successfully in America $5 billion for Principal Global, focusing on growth rather than ROC. So ROC ka obsession was perhaps our desi obsession. These two colleagues have helped us reduce the obsession, focus on growth, and courtesy learning from the American and European companies he's invested in. We can see that, for example, a lot of Costco's strategies are relevant for Trent, for Zudio, for West Side. A lot of Danaher strategies are relevant for Tube, right? Basically, Tube is Danaher replicated in India. Danaher, by the way, has compounded 3,000 guna. 40 साल में. Danaher is the only company in the S&P 500 which has outperformed the S&P 500 in every single 3-year rolling period. No tech company has pulled that off, right? So what Tube is doing is taking Danaher's template. Danaher is part of the American portfolio that Arindam has built. Rakshit is investing in Tube back home, right? And similarly, this applicability of growth-centric models with frugality and leanness built in is, I think, coming home to our country, and it's a wonderful thing for the nation. Thank you for setting this up, Swani. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Group photo, sir. So we'll all join you for lunch. Please stay with us for lunch. आप यहाँ पे आ जाइए, पीछे कर देते हैं. ये ले लेंगे. अच्छा. Thank you. Closer मतलब ये हटा देना. नहीं कर लेता हूँ.